Chapter 3. Help. I need somebody. My partner's cold, steel blue eyes seemed to stare right through me as if I weren't there. There were no words spoken between us, just silence broken only by the sound of him tapping his pencil in nervous tension. Or was it anger? Meanwhile, the chatter of what-ifs became noise in my head that had not ceased since I sought sleep the night before in Boise. That night had been a life or death decision for me. I chose to live and deal with the consequences. Even though that was my wish, the endless chatter within my head was telling me otherwise, and it was confusing. Everything seemed daunting, and I felt so overwhelmed. I could find no solutions. There was no rest. I played what I would say to them over and over again in my mind as I traveled across the continent back home. Debating with whom to talk to first, I concluded that talking to my partners would be easier than talking to my wife. Frankly, the last thing I wanted to do was talk to my wife, knowing that as the words streamed from my mouth, it would literally shatter her world. Although built on an illusion, our world was her security, something she could rely on and be proud of. Never in her wildest dreams would she think that in one instant, everything would change. I could only guess what her response would be. How I dreaded that conversation. I looked up at my partners, wishing they would say something, anything. I wondered if I should speak, but their faces signaled clearly that this was a time of silence for me. Perhaps, just perhaps, they would be more understanding considering the successful business we built together. I slipped into denial again. Creating illusions was second nature for me. Perhaps they would help me find a solution. After all, my choices would have a direct effect on their livelihood in the CPA practice. Maybe, just maybe, we could devise a way to cover it all up, make restitution and move on. Maybe that would be best for us all. Then out of silence, my partner said, "Well, I have a solution." I couldn't believe my ears. For the first time in almost 24 hours, I felt that perhaps someone with a clearer head than mine could make some sense of this mess I created. With a small feeling of hope, I looked up into my partner's eyes. I wasn't going to have to go through this alone. There was a way out. I don't know what he saw sitting across the table from me. I felt a gleam in my eye, anticipating some solution, any solution that would ease this burden. "I think you should kill yourself." There was no emotion in his voice. As I stared into his eyes, I realized that he was dead serious. "Your debts would be paid. After all, you have life insurance long enough that there should be no suicide clause. The community would take pity on your children and rally around your wife and save her from the shame of your actions. Chuck, frankly, you don't deserve to live." Only moments before, I had a brief glimpse of hope, only to be crushed by the words of my partner. I had committed to maintain control of my emotions, but at that moment, reality set in. There wasn't going to be an easy way out. My choices were destined to have consequences. The first was disconnection from my partners. "Chuck, you're fired." My other partner spoke without emotion, but perhaps with a little compassion. "We can't keep you on here. I'm sure you understand that. However, killing yourself isn't an option either. Your children deserve more than that. Now, let's get on with the next steps. You owe us that." I knew he was right. I felt sick as I realized that my selfish choices were about to unleash a plethora of unwanted consequences on so many people, including my family. What was the right thing to do when I had done so much wrong? The question was clear, the answer even clearer. Make the right choices. My life depended on it. For the next hour and a half, I shared with my partners the detail of the frauds I had committed. They were shocked at times, mostly overwhelmed, and clearly concerned about the consequences that my actions would cause them. My choices not only impacted my family, but also their families. They had children to put through school and a thriving business. At least they thought it was thriving until that day. They had the respect of the community. Now what would happen to them? I put my head into my hands and shook my head in disbelief. What had I done? How did I get here? As they tried to make sense of everything, they would ask questions. What did you do with all that money? One of my partners asked. I was being peppered with questions like bullets from an automatic weapon. Do you have a problem with drugs or gambling? I mean, how can you have nothing to show for $250,000? The questions kept coming, one right after the other. When a crisis arises, usually human nature tries to make sense of it. As they grasped the enormity of my theft, control was what they needed. As I would later discover, these questions were just a taste of what was to come. We'd talk details for a while until it became overwhelming, and then the questions would begin again. Looking back, I can't really imagine how they must have felt. Betrayed, shocked, bewildered. What did they do to deserve their lives being so drastically changed? I did not expect rejection from my partners, at least not as quickly and cleanly as it happened. Somehow I lived under the deluded, misguided attitude that perhaps in order to cover up my incredible misdeeds, my partners and I might figure out a way to make restitution and move on. That would have put a Band-Aid on the problem. The lessons would have been short-lived. If that had happened, the only result would have been more bad choices, creating yet even greater negative outcomes. Yet part of me wanted that solution, just to clean up the mess and continue as if nothing had happened. As those thoughts went through my head, I knew that my life had become unmanageable. What seemed to be the perfect illusion had become an insatiable nightmare. The money went to lifestyle. The lifestyle created the illusion, which demanded more money. I was no more in control than a plane flying without a pilot. Being blindly guided by success, greed, and power kept me oblivious to the inevitable outcome I was beginning to face. As long as I could manage the illusion, juggle the theft, and move forward with life as I knew it, I was fine. During that time, never once did I come to believe that I could not pay back and move on undetected. I felt an almost invincible attitude. I was smart, in control, and feeding my ego, never sensing that I had created a house of cards that had no chance of surviving intact. I had no conscious idea that all it would take was for one card to be removed and the house would tumble down. That card had been pulled 2 days before. I was standing in the middle of the crash with nowhere to turn, beginning to understand how little control I had in my life. Because my wife was expecting her husband and the father of her 2 children to return later in the afternoon, I had time after meeting with my partners to call on my attorney. More than once, I've had people ask if my attorney was more important than my wife. Of course not. But as soon as I walked out of the office where I had served as tax partner, I knew the legal wheels of justice would be greased and the consequence process begun. I needed to seek legal counsel and to have a legal plan on which to move forward. I sought help from an attorney who was also a friend. For once, our meeting wasn't about mutual clients or about how our family stories were unfolding. This time, I was the client. Not something he was expecting on a Friday midday, nor something he wanted. As I left the attorney's office, I could see the disappointment on his face. I didn't know that this would be the same look repeated many times over as friends and family discovered the truth of my illusion. As I drove home, I realized I felt helpless. My power over the outcome had been reduced to zero. I couldn't control the players. I couldn't make the moves. I couldn't control the outcomes. The only thing I could do was focus moment by moment on the choices I was making and trust that a power greater than myself was in control. Since I had never been in this place before, I was moving blindly forward. I knew then that all I had was a power greater than me. The feeling of helplessness and not being in control was unfamiliar. Through luck, wit, or manipulation, there had always been a confidence that underpinned my decisions, a knowledge that I had the power to manipulate an outcome. Now that the manipulations no longer worked and the reality of failure loomed, I realized that I never had the power. It was only an illusion, and I was a master illusionist. In so many ways, we can control the outcome. Good choices yield good results. The law of reciprocity says you reap what you sow. Through personal experience, I have found that to be true. Yet no matter the illusion, we can't change the forces of the universe. On Earth, denying gravity exists doesn't make it so. Once a choice is made, we can create an illusion of no consequence and deny its existence, but that doesn't make it so. Ultimately, we are responsible for our choices and the consequences that follow. What is true is that we may not know what specifically the consequence is or how it will unfold. Often we might find that the outcome is far different than what we might have predicted, or that the outcome takes unexpected twists and turns. But there is always an outcome, a consequence for every action. Having told my story 3 times in detail, once to a counselor the night before in Boise, attempting to avoid suicide, again now to my former partners, and finally to my attorney, didn't make the drive home any easier. This was going to be the most difficult and most painful. What was I going to say? Admitting to the person I loved most in the world that I was a liar and a thief didn't seem natural. I felt I would lose everything I held most dear, the love of my wife and the adoration of my children. Pulling into the drive, I stopped short of the garage. I didn't want to alert anyone to my presence quite yet. I needed a moment to gather myself and prepare for the inevitable. I knew as I walked through the door that my oldest son would descend upon me, jumping into my arms, welcoming his daddy home. How I longed to see him and my youngest son, 8 months old. My bonds with both of them had been set. I had been active with both of them as infants, feeding them in the wee hours of the morning, attending to their needs. Although I traveled frequently, they both thoroughly enjoyed the homecomings. When I was home, they showered me with unconditional love in a way that only children seem to do. This time, I just wanted to bathe in that love. As I imagined the reunion with my children, I also sensed impending doom. This homecoming would certainly be a time of intense joy, and at the same time, it would be filled with intense grief as I revealed the truth. After the meeting with my partners and their rejection, I knew that I would experience even greater rejection in what used to be the sanctity of my home. I was at the bottom. I knew that was the only place I could strip away the illusions and see the reality of who I was. Today, I know what I didn't know then. My rock bottom was a gift of life. At that moment, it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like hell. As I closed the car door, I took a deep breath as I mustered the courage to keep a cheery face for my children. knowing that soon I'd be telling this story one more time and the person hearing it would be shocked. I knew when I walked through that door that not only my life would be changed, but also the lives of my family. As the key slid into the door, my entry marked the beginning of yet more of the consequences. I enjoyed our lifestyle. My wife enjoyed our lifestyle. Never once did it occur to her that the way we lived was built on an illusion. On that day, however, the truth was revealed. Ugly, unadulterated, bitter truth came pouring out to an unsuspecting recipient. She didn't ask for this. To her, all was unfair, unwanted, like living a walking bad dream. Through the tears and painful emotions, she just wanted it all to go away. "Oh God," she cried, "we need help." Somehow the cry for help came purely from her. Admitting my defects, hidden failures, character flaws, whatever one might want to call them, was not natural for me any more than seeking help. This time, she was right. There was no way we could ever make it through this without help. This choice, uttered by two people crying, being consoled by a 4-year-old who was struggling to make sense of this very odd homecoming, was the first right choice in a long while. We need